I'm curious how far you think this can go. This Donald Trump seems to be asserting that, and Rudy Giuliani is explicitly asserting on behalf of his client, Donald Trump, that he can basically, because he is the head of the executive branch, Article 2 of the Constitution puts the president as the head of the executive branch. So all these executive agencies that are created by the first among equals, the legislature. The legislature creates the Department of Justice. Well, actually, I'm not sure if the Department of Justice itself is in the Constitution, but in any case, the legislature creates the Environmental Protection Agency. The president then decides who's in charge of it and what it's going to do, what its mandate is. And, outside of courts, which the president can pack, and actually Mitch McConnell plays a larger role than that, and he is packing courts. But outside of that, basically the president says that he can control the investigative agencies of government, the FBI, specifically in this case the FBI, and other investigatory bodies, because he created them, or because he's the boss of them. And if he doesn't like what's going on, I mean, the example that's being used on cable television is, if he wanted to shoot Jim Comey, literally, and then pardon himself for murder, he can do that. And, Article 2, Section 2, if I'm remembering correctly, let me pull up my pocket Constitution here. Article 2, Section 2, Paragraph 2 is my recollection. No, it's not. Oh, here it is. Yeah, it's Paragraph 1. It says the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia, the several states when called in the actual service of the United States. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices. And here's this is the ringing bell, right? This is what Trump is basing his entire, all his hopes and prayers on, as they say. He shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Now, it does not say except against himself. It only says except in cases of impeachment. So, I've written several books about constitutional law, but I am not a lawyer myself and don't present myself as an authority on this. But there are people who are authorities. In August of 1974, there was a discussion. This was at the height of Watergate. This was during the Senate hearings on Watergate. And the question was asked, can Richard Nixon pardon himself and remain in office if the Senate can't impeach him? Now, at that point in time, the broad and general knowledge of the depth and breadth of Nixon's crimes was fairly well known, including by Republicans in the Senate. In fact, it was Republicans in the Senate, including Barry Goldwater, who went to the White House, sat down with Nixon, and said, "Sir, you are going to be impeached if you do not resign." And within a day or two, Nixon resigned. But there was this very serious question that was being put forward. Does he have the power to pardon himself? And the Deputy Attorney General, and you can find this on the Department of Justice's website. This is August 5th, 1974, 4 days before Nixon resigned. The memorandum of opinion for the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. I am forwarding to you an outline on the question whether the president can receive an executive or legislative pardon and several substitute measures. Quote, under the fundamental rule that no one may be a judge in his own case, the president cannot pardon himself. Now, he goes on to say that if the president wanted to have a functional pardon, what he could do is he could invoke the 25th Amendment himself and say, I'm not capable of serving as president right now. I'm going to put Mike Pence in charge. And then Mike Pence can pardon the president, because that wouldn't be the president judging himself. right? And then the president could resign, or he could resume the duties of office. He could become president again. In fact, that's what the Deputy Attorney General, who, by the way, was a Republican in the Nixon administration, wrote. He said, if under the 25th Amendment the president declared that he was temporarily unfit to perform the duties of office, the vice president would become acting president and, as such, could pardon President Nixon, the president. Thereafter, Nixon could either resign or resume the duties of his office. Although, as a general matter, Congress cannot enact amnesty or pardoning legislation because to do so would interfere with the pardoning power vested expressly in the president by the Constitution, it could be argued that a congressional pardon granted to the president would not interfere with the president's pardoning power because that power does not extend to the president himself. Now, he's assuming, the Deputy Attorney General in 1974 is assuming that the president cannot pardon himself because of this broad legal principle that literally goes back to 12th century British common law, that no man can sit as his own judge, or presumably woman as well, or whatever, I mean, fill in the blank, but the language of the day. No one may be a judge in his own case. But I don't find that in the Constitution. That's a matter of established law. And Donald Trump is making the argument that because that's not in the Constitution does not restrict his power to pardon himself, he can simply do it. I mean, he has essentially officially declared himself above the law. That's what's going on. His lawyers for months have argued quietly that he could not possibly have committed obstruction because he has unfettered authority over all federal investigations. Now, there's two really important points here that I want to make before we hit this break, and we'll pick up some of your phone calls, too, on this. Two really important points I want to make. Number one, the impeachment in the House of Representatives and the subsequent trial in the Senate are not legal proceedings in the strictest sense of the law. They don't come out of the Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR. They come out of the Constitution. And they are arguably, essentially, a political process. As such, what Trump and Giuliani and Sean Hannity and all the guys on right-wing hate radio and, you know, that bunch, right, the Trump crowd, what they're arguing right now is that Trump has the absolute authority to stop the investigation because the DOJ is an executive branch agency, that Trump has the power to pardon anybody, including himself, and he's demonstrating that by pardoning Scooter Libby and you know, all these other folks. He did a whole bunch of pardons recently, Joe Arpaio, et cetera. And the reason that they're making this argument, and actually there's a much larger argument that they're making, you know, the Hannitys of the world and, you know, the right-wingers of the world, and that is that there's a deep state conspiracy. Trump is tweeting about the 8 Democrats in the FBI who are investigating him or in Mueller's organization. That there is this deep state Democratic conspiracy to destroy his presidency. Now, you'll recall, I said this is a political process. It takes 2/3 of the Senate to remove him from office. If he can keep his base, which is heavily reached and indoctrinated by Fox so-called news and right-wing hate radio, if he can keep his base intact, and they can put enough pressure on that 1/3 of the Senate, which would be about 2/3 of the Senate Republicans, so that they hold firm and they will not remove him from office, then it's the Bill Clinton scenario or the Andrew Johnson scenario. He gets impeached in the House, goes to the Senate, there's a trial, he's found not guilty. End of discussion. That's number one. Number one, they're doing this as a political strategy. Number two, and I think this is really important and is not being pointed out in the media anywhere near frequently enough, is that the core of the argument that Trump and his lawyers are making right now is that, yes, of course he's guilty. If he wasn't guilty, we wouldn't be talking about impeachment and pardons. And the people around him are guilty. Nobody's arguing that he's innocent. right? An innocent person would say, hey, investigate me, please. I'll come and testify. Let's get this done with. And that's what Trump started out, because he's such a good bluffer, right? I mean, in his mind, the art of the deal is all about bluffing and lying. And, you know, that may work in real estate. But, you know, it's not working now. He started out with this bluff. Oh, sure, I'd love to meet with Mueller. Now, no way. In fact, I can fire the guy. He's claiming he's guilty. Does his base get it?